Innovation's all about people, and at the heart, of course, are the individuals, their knowledge, their creativity, the different roles that they can play. But innovation is also a multiplayer game. It's very clear it's not a solo act, it's not about one individual, it's about people working together, which means that the key unit we need to focus on and think about in innovation is the team. Now, a team is not just a group of people. If we think of a game like football, there may be 11 people on the pitch, but what they're doing is working well as a team. Great football teams are welded together, are trained, they're built. They're not just an assembly of 11 people. And it's the same with innovation teams. Teams can be made and developed. What we've learned about teams can help us in this process. And one of the most important things we've learned about teams is that to be effective, we need a number of different roles. If everyone is the same, everyone's a creative genius, that is not a very effective team. If everyone's a good project manager, making sure things are done to deadline, that does not make an effective team. The best teams, especially in the area of innovation, have a diversity of roles and an awareness of the different roles they need. Certainly people with creative ideas, people who are good at building on ideas, people who are good at finding resources, a number of different roles coming together to enable that team to function effectively. And another thing that we've learned about teams is that they don't instantly happen. There's a process, one in fact that was studied extensively in the 20th century, looking at how do teams come together and how do they move from being an assembly of people to an effective unit. And a very famous piece of research very nicely labelled the 4 stages through which a team goes. It first of all forms, people come together, but then there's a process of hearing each other, exploring each other, and a certain tension, a conflict, a phase called storming. People are pushing for position, trying to identify who they are. Teams are, if they're going to come together, people expressing themselves. Gradually, that storming gives way to a kind of agreement across the team. This is how we're going to work. These are the rules of our game. This is how we do things in this team. So they move from storming to norming. They have some shared values and some shared beliefs, some norms about how they'll operate, and then they can move to performing. So the 4 phases, a very useful reminder, there's forming, storming, norming, and performing. And we can see this in a number of situations, especially among creative teams. If they all agree with each other, there's no tension, there's no argument, and quite possibly not a lot of creativity. If we think by contrast of the kind of place where innovation is very much at the heart, think of a group of actors on a film set or in a theatre group. They come together and very quickly they might have arguments and differences about how they're going to operate and how they're going to express their individual creativity so that as a team they create something. So we can see this forming, storming, norming, and gradually performing. What's interesting is how much the training for people like actors involves now learning how to be in a team, how to bring together individual skills and creativity, but how to work with others to create something special, something that's greater than the sum of the parts. Now, not surprisingly, given the importance of teams as the key unit that draws together individual creativity, knowledge, and capability, if the team is so important, there's been a lot of research about how do effective creative teams function and what are the key influences. And in particular, 4 factors seem very important. The first, some sense of shared vision. We want to get somewhere and we want to get quite a long way, a stretching goal. A very famous example of this was the Lockheed Skunk Works project back in the Second World War, which at the time was essentially a team tasked with doing something that was pretty near impossible. At that time, the Allied forces, the Americans and the British, knew that the Germans already had a jet aeroplane flying in the sky, and they had nothing. So the challenge to the team was we need to create a jet fighter aeroplane, and we have 6 months to do it. An impossible timescale from a zero start. And to make life worse, the only working jet engine was in Britain and had to come all the way across the sea to the United States, and that would take 2 months. So there's not even a technology to play with until you're halfway through the project. A seemingly impossible goal which they achieved. Not only did they do it within 6 months, it flew right first time. And that design eventually became the design that was used for trainer fighters throughout the period after the war. So that Skunkworks team is a highly creative team, and at the heart of it was this sense of engaging shared vision and particularly a stretching goal. A second really important set of factors around creativity in the team level is the sense of what's called psychological safety. Now, if you think about it, in order to be creative, you have to offer ideas. And if you're in the kind of environment where you say something and someone else says, "Oh, don't be stupid," or "That's a stupid idea," or "We've tried it before." If you have a sense that I don't want to risk myself, I don't want to stretch ideas, then you won't do it. So what we need is the kind of environment which is psychologically safe, which allows people to take ideas, offer them, and build on others. So the second key factor is this sense of psychological safety. And one of the powerful ways in which that's expressed is the third factor, listening and building. So teams aren't simply individuals throwing their ideas in a magic pot. They're listening to an idea and they're saying, yes, and. So there's this sense of shared creativity, building on the ideas of others, going in directions that perhaps any single individual might not have seen. So that all sounds rather nice, psychologically safe, yes and, building on ideas, but we have to be careful. Because the fourth factor suggests that actually, if we're all very nice to each other, we're not very creative. That actually what we need is a measure of creative conflict. And coming up with challenges to ideas makes for better ideas. Now clearly this is difficult, it's a balancing act. If somebody says, I've got a possibility here, and they offer an idea and someone else says, don't be stupid, it's not going to work. That's not psychologically safe, that's not supportive. But equally, I've got this crazy idea, and everyone says, yes, 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 yes. That also isn't going to work. What we need is that balance between offering an idea and creative challenge that makes it a stronger idea. The film company Pixar is a great example where this really pays dividends, this idea of constructive, creative conflict. They've got a reputation not just of making one great movie, but time after time after time coming up with really new approaches. They're a very innovative company. Not by accident, they've learned and developed the way their teams can handle constructive conflict. So it's not just a case of someone having a brilliant idea, they've got to be able to defend the idea, others will build on it, but what they're creatively trying to do is come up with something that is strong and robust through a process of continuous challenge. So let's summarize where we've been in this film. Teams make innovation happen. It's a multiplayer game. It's not about the individuals. It's not a solo act. But effective teams are made, not born. They're not simply an assembly of people. They develop and can be developed. In particular, we've learned that effective teams need a mixture of roles and different people playing those roles. Teams go through a process of forming, storming, norming before they're able to perform. They learn and evolve. And research shows that 4 sets of factors particularly influence effective creative teams. Having a vision and some stretching goals to draw everyone's attention and energy towards innovation. Having a climate that is psychologically safe, supportive even when people are taking quite big mental risks, offering creative ideas. And particularly providing support and building on others' ideas, a kind of yes and culture. But it isn't just a nice place to be. What's also important is some element of creative, constructive conflict, challenging ideas to make them better. Now, let's